Beyond due diligence, what do we need to consider for successful negotiations, acquisitions, and mergers in the global economy?
There are many pitfalls to any global merger or acquisition situation. One of them is the most basic cross-cultural error of all, which is to assume that the other folks are more like us than they actually are. And there are many, many instances of that. We cite one in the book, Our Leading Across New Borders. It's a great case study done by a lead author, is a fellow by the name of Krishna Palepu and his colleagues. And they discuss the case of Bharti Airtel, India's leading cell company, which went into Africa. And when you really begin to think about all the challenges that the company encountered in Africa, it was because they assumed the Indian market and the African market were more similar than they actually were. So both have a colonial history, right? But India has primarily one major colonial master within its recent history, which is England. If you think about Africa, pretty much every major European power, plus the Ottoman Empire, has been in part of Africa at one point or another. So the British, the French, the Dutch, the Germans, the Belgians, the Spanish, the Italians, the list goes on. And that means a much more fragmented environment linguistically and in terms of economic structures. And so instead of dealing with one market, as they were in India, they discovered that they were dealing with 16 or 17 different countries with different regulatory structures, different habits, different governments. So actually the similarity that they assumed was not there in anywhere near the magnitude that they thought. Another is that, gosh, India is a subcontinent, Africa is a continent. But guess what? Africa is 7 times plus larger than India, and many parts of Africa are far removed from the coast, and so just even getting their product and their equipment into particular locations was a big challenge for them. So we tend to assume that similarities are there, which are larger than in life they actually are. We tend to underestimate the differences, which is the counterpart of assuming similarities. And then when we really sit down and do diligence, instead of focusing on these, we focus on what are the financials of the company that we're considering and purchasing, what is the strategy, how much overlap is there between our customers. And so we're looking at this rather narrow area, which it turns out we should be looking at the whole periphery around it in order to really be successful with this acquisition in this market. So having a due diligence process which explores and looks for all those differences in infrastructure and regulations, in local management and leadership culture, employee lifestyles, consumer habits, and so on. This is the due diligence that many companies really need when they're doing a cross-border acquisition.